Hey guys, so my name's Anthony and this is Dev Hero. And in today's quick video, I'm just gonna go over a quick comparison of Node.js versus PHP. So as a lot of you guys know, if you've been following my story, I've been a full stack PHP developer for about 10 years now. And about a year and a half ago, I started taking the trek and the journey on my road to becoming a full stack JavaScript developer. And I attended a coding bootcamp. I went to Rutgers Coding Bootcamp where we learned the MERN stack. So it's MongoDB, Express, React, and Node. And in that time, I've become a bit of a fanboy for Node.js, for just like full stack JavaScript in general. I think it's really practical. If you're starting an app, if you're building an application, if you're coming out with a web app and you're looking for a framework or a stack to use, I think full stack JavaScript is just super practical. You learn one language, and that one language you'll be proficient in both like front-end development and back-end development. And granted, there are some differences and some nuances between what you can do with JavaScript and Node on the back end and what you can do with JavaScript in the browser. And there's limitations of the browser, and in many regards, I think the browsers haven't caught up to the server framework. But at the end of the day, you're writing the same syntax or very similar syntax, and there's actually compilers like Webpack and Grunt and all those things, Sass, that can compile and kind of bring your stuff up to standards. So you can even write more modern JavaScript on the front end, and even if browsers haven't supported it yet, you run a compiler like Webpack and it'll actually bring your stuff up to speed. So if we look at the landscape of you getting a job, so that's an interesting, I actually just watched a video from Code Phase. I'm going to leave a link in the description to that video, but he actually came at it from a different standpoint, which is getting a job. Getting a job, especially as a junior dev, in PHP, you're going to be way better off. There's tons of like agencies that still use WordPress. There's tons of startups that use WordPress. There's just tons of companies that are out there that are using Laravel, CodeIgniter. There's tons of companies that are using PHP, and they're not going to stop using PHP because something new came out. Once your framework is architected, even if the app was built 3 years ago, once your app is built, like doing an entire rebuild to a whole new language is kind of out of the question. But that being said, I really still think that full stack JavaScript is important to learn, because at the end of the day, you need JavaScript anyway. You're going to need to know how to do JavaScript on the front end regardless. So learning one language, especially in the beginning, I feel like it's super easier as a junior dev to like understand. So at Rutgers, we learned full stack JavaScript, and a lot of the guys built really cool, awesome, amazing stuff. And I really think, they struggled, but they still built amazing things. Fausto, shout out to you. He built this amazing, like Internet of Things button that you press a button and it sends like an SMS alert out to your, 5 most important contacts, and all these other cool things that got built while we were in the boot camp. People built real-time video apps, like all this really cool stuff. And again, they struggled through it. It's their first 6 months learning how to code. Of course, they struggled through it, but they were able to get through it. And I don't know if throwing HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and then PHP, and then MySQL and X, Y, and Z and Postgres and all this stuff at a person at one time, I feel like that's almost too much to ask for. Now, me myself, I don't ever want to look at PHP ever again. I'm super proficient in it. I can jump into it. It's not a problem. But like me as a developer, if I'm dictating the terms of the project that I'm working on, do I want to touch PHP? I don't. But that's more of like a personal preference. Is it viable in the market? Are you going to have the ability to land a really good entry-level job at an agency, at a marketing company, at an e-commerce startup. Like PHP is really huge in e-commerce. There's a lot of really good frameworks out there like Magento and OpenCar. And I guess the question can boil down to this: should you learn PHP? The answer is yes. If you are a junior dev and it's your first year, maybe even second year of learning how to code, and you're looking to break into tech and you're looking to land your first role, listen, man, there's a lot of big companies out there that use PHP. Facebook uses PHP, Wikipedia uses PHP, Slack uses PHP. I think it powers like somewhere close to like 80-90% of the internet, some crazy statistic like that. And you know, the reason is it's the open source Node.js of 10 years ago or whatever. And you know, there's all these frameworks and all these open source kind of platforms that exist for it. And there's tons of companies that have like adopted it, especially like small to medium sized companies. Bigger companies, they might be using like Java or C# or something crazy. But the small and medium sized companies, which is most companies are not Coca-Cola, they're using PHP. And even in big companies, they'll have some PHP app. You know what I mean? A big company probably has, you know, hundreds of different applications, both internal and external. And chances are somewhere along the line, there was some shit that was written in PHP and they're not gonna go rewrite that shit. So PHP is a great framework to learn. There's a huge community, like I said. OpenCart, you can get a shopping cart for a customer up if you're doing freelance work. Magento is a great e-commerce solution, and there's a ton more. WordPress is one of the most popular content management systems that's out there. Again, WordPress is deployed by CNN, Forbes magazine, the New York Times, pretty much any major publication, Inc., any major publication that's out there, chances are they're using WordPress. So is WordPress a valuable skill to have on your resume, especially as a junior dev? Absolutely. So should you learn PHP? Yes. Now, what are the pros and cons? So some of the pros of learning PHP are obviously the job market, right? So you're able to find jobs pretty easily. Like even in small cities, and probably even more so in small cities, you'll have a mom and pop e-commerce, not mom and pop, it could be a 50 employee shop, but you'll have smaller companies that are using PHP in production. And they'll be looking for devs, and you'll be able to say, yeah, I've done PHP, here's my portfolio, I've done X, Y, and Z projects, right? The availability of open source projects that you can use to deploy for like a customer, for a freelance customer, that'll get you 99% of the way to where you kind of want to be. If you don't want something that's super custom and robust, sure. You know, PHP is going to have a bunch of like plug and play drop-in solutions where you like install a script and now you have an Uber app. And it might not be the best Uber app, but it'll be an Uber app and it'll work, right? Or a shopping cart. Say you want a shopping cart, there's a huge availability of, you know, plug and play scripts that are just out there. Now, is that landscape changing as React evolves and as Node.js evolves? Yes. Is there a ton more Node packages out there than there ever have been? And you know, if we're counting NPM packages, which I kind of think are more developer building blocks than a full-out framework, but if you're counting NPM packages, yeah, there's probably way more NPM packages than like Composer packages. Composer is the NPM for PHP. But still, there's like a huge, vibrant PHP community. There's tons of projects that are out there that use PHP. WordPress is super versatile. So yeah, definitely like flexibility and like availability of packages and frameworks is high on PHP. One of the other cool things is it's really, really flexible. It's like more flexible than Node.js. And that can be a bad thing because you can do really bad things. You can like include files all over the place where they don't belong. You can have multiple entry points to an application. And what that means is like in Node.js, you have one server.js file, and that server.js file spins up when your server spins up, and that is the only way to access your application. And the rules that are in Express are the only rules that will ever be followed by your application. In PHP, every single .php file is executable, which means if you go to a web browser and you type in, let's say you had an application with 3 files, and one of them is index.php, one of them is server.php, and one of them is upload.php. And this upload script is where you put all your logic to upload files to your server, right? And you don't use that upload.php, you don't call that directly. That's going to get included into your server.php, right? But if you go to a web browser and you type in uploads.php, it will execute whatever's in that script. So it's it's good when you're learning, because you're able to basically create a random file. I can create hacker.php and I can throw it onto a server, and if I type in hacker.php and I hit enter, it's going to execute all the code that's in that file. But on the flip side, it's kind of bad. Like, it's kind of a security risk. It leads people to do things like have 10 files. If you don't know what you're doing, you're going to have 10 PHP files the way you would have 10 HTML files, and that's not really good. You want to use a framework that keeps you consistent with routing. Now, that's not to say that PHP doesn't have that. PHP has a brilliant framework called Laravel, which is essentially the Ruby on Rails MVC framework for PHP. But you're not forced to use Laravel. So if you're not using Laravel and you're not using an existing framework and you're just learning PHP, you have the flexibility, which is great, but then also, can be a burden to have unorganized code later on. And that is part of the reason why PHP gets a really bad rap, is because there's no rules. There's literally no rules. You can put rules into your project. You can say, this is our project and this is how we structure it. That's what Laravel does. Laravel puts a lot of structure and a lot of rules and best practices on top of PHP's framework. But PHP, naked, the way it is, you can literally have an HTML template file, and midway into the file, you can open up PHP brackets, and all of a sudden you're writing PHP again. And there's so many potential to do whatever you want, and that potential can cause, bad practices. So that's kind of like a pro and a con, right? So we have availability of open source projects, availability of jobs on the market, and then we have flexibility. And those are probably the really 3. It's super flexible. It's really great for a beginner because you can kind of get the basics down and really learn some awesome stuff. And there's tons of examples out there. It is documented. There is a community around it. Now let's go on the Node.js side. So Node.js, it's one language to rule them all. So you're learning one language, and now you have front end and back end. That's powerful. You don't have to learn 50 languages. You're learning one language, and now your brain doesn't have to shift gears. I don't know about you, but when I jump from PHP to JavaScript, or I jump from PHP to Ruby, or I jump from PHP to anything, my brain has to shift gears a little bit, and I have to get in a different flow and a different rhythm. And with full stack JavaScript, you're writing JavaScript on the front end. You can't not write JavaScript on the front end. Web browsers only know how to read JavaScript. That's not changing anytime soon. JavaScript is the language of the web, right? So you already have to know JavaScript and be good at JavaScript to build awesome web apps. Now you can just take that same framework that you were using to build your front-end framework, and you can do it on the back end. Your brain doesn't have to shift gears. You don't have to learn a new syntax. So I think that's super powerful. So flexibility versus, I'm gonna call it versatility on the Node.js side. So you have versatility, one language to rule them all. Number 2, I think, is probably, it's trending very heavily, just JavaScript in general. So even if, and again, this is gonna kind of go back to the one language to rule them all thing, but even if can't get a role doing Node, if you get really, really good and really proficient in JavaScript and front-end MVC frameworks like React and Angular, then you'll be able to get a role at a Ruby shop that needs an Angular or React developer. You'll be able to get a role at a PHP shop, you know what I mean, that knows that needs React and people that do front end. So if you get really good at JavaScript and front end, you'll be able to get a job pretty much anywhere. You know, I just got a bunch of guys hired at a digital agency that does all PHP, and they don't know any PHP. They're full stack JavaScript developers, but JavaScript is going to be required, front end is going to be required. PHP is more of the vehicle to deliver that content, but once the content is there, it's all going to get styled up, and all the interactions are going to be done in JavaScript. So the nice thing about getting really, really good at JavaScript is it's required everywhere else. You can spend a bunch of time getting really, really good with Ruby, and then if Ruby isn't the stack that the company uses, and you're only good at Ruby and you're not good at JavaScript at all, how are you going to get a job? Like, they're not going to hire you. They're not going to hire a Ruby developer at a PHP shop. They're not going to hire a Ruby developer at a Python shop. They're not going to hire a Ruby developer at a Node shop if all you know is Ruby. Or all you know is PHP, right? If all you know is PHP and you're trash in JavaScript, then you can only get a job at just places that do PHP and WordPress, right? But if you're really, really, really good in JavaScript, and maybe you're okay in Ruby and you're okay in PHP, you'll have the opportunity to work at tons of places because they'll know that, okay, you know, this guy's okay in PHP, he's really good in JavaScript, he knows the fundamentals of what an MVC framework should look like, what a data schema and data model and all that stuff should look like. And, you know, we'll forgive the fact that he's only okay in PHP. He can kind of learn that and level up on the job, right? But if you know zero JavaScript, you know what I mean? And you could be productive just writing JavaScript, right? And like, we'll level you up in PHP as the time goes on. But if you're like super ninja man in PHP and you're just like okay in JavaScript, and you go to a Ruby shop or you go to a Node shop, they're gonna look at you and say, dude, you know, we can't really use you. You have this high strength in PHP. And like, that's not to say they won't hire you. Like, you know, let the hiring manager tell you that you're not hired. Like, never disqualify yourself. If you want to go work somewhere, like, just go apply, man. Go apply and knock on the door until it comes off of the hinges. But that being said, you're much more likely to get a role just doing React and not even worrying about the back end than you are you know, being proficient in PHP and trying to work at a Ruby or a Node shop or a Java shop, right? You know, so JavaScript is definitely versatile in the fact that not only is it one language to rule them all, but it's required in the web browser. So even if Node.js goes out of flavor, right? Even if tomorrow, you know, everyone stops using Node.js, they can't stop using JavaScript. They can't deny that. And packages like NPM, which is the Node Package Manager. I was using NPM and the Node Package Manager way before I learned Node. I was using NPM when we were doing PHP because we were using Grunt and Gulp and Sass and all these build tools to compile our CSS and our front-end JavaScript. So at the end of the day, like, Node really isn't going anywhere. And you're gonna need it in some capacity, whether it's only on the front end and only on your local computer for build tools, or whether it is a full stack JavaScript application. And what's my third favorite thing about Node? I would say my third favorite thing about Node, and this is gonna be the same thing as PHP, is the community. I mean, the community is vibrant. I would say PHP has a huge community. There's tons of documentation, there's tons of stuff, but you know, PHP's kind of dying out. You know, a lot of the cool, trendy, hipster developers, they're not making new stuff in it. So there's this wealth, there's this 10-year head start or 15-year head start that PHP had, and there's all these projects that are out there, but are people making new projects constantly for PHP? You know, not so much. Again, not to say that there's not tons of stuff out there for PHP. There is. But if you want to compare the two, like if you want to compare Composer and the new Composer packages that are coming out versus NPM and all the NPM packages that are coming out, I really don't think there's a comparison. So the community is definitely vibrant. There's really a lot of rockstar ninja developers that are becoming Node developers because it's so practical. Like there's guys that specialized in iOS, they never did PHP, they never did JavaScript, and now they're specializing in React because you have React Native and you can use JavaScript to make native mobile apps, not those iframe PhoneGap apps of 5-10 years ago. No, I'm talking about native. Every component that you touch on the screen is an iOS component or an Android component. So you can use JavaScript to compile and write native apps. It's super versatile, and there's like a huge community. There's like tutorials coming out for this stuff all the time. And I really do think it's on the upswing. That being said, should you learn some PHP? Yes, you should. Should you have a little bit of proficiency in what are the basics of PHP? Absolutely. Should you go take the Code Academy PHP, and especially if you're trying to break into tech and you're trying to get your first role, should you go take the Code Academy PHP? Absolutely. If you can't find a job just doing React, should you take a role doing PHP and React, or PHP and jQuery, or whatever? Absolutely. But if you have the ability to choose, if you have the magic wand and you can say, okay, well, I'm building a project for a client, or I'm building my passion project, I want to build the next Facebook, and I kind of feel if Zuckerberg was alive and 18, he is alive, but if he was 18 today and he was in his dorm room in 2017 and he was building Facebook today, he would be doing it with full stack JavaScript. He did it in PHP because PHP was the NodeJS, was the open source framework of 10 years ago. But today in 2017, should you be using JavaScript? If you're starting a new project, should you be using full stack JavaScript? I think it's like an undeniable yes. The access to developers, like I spoke about, you're able to have the most availability of developers because every developer should know JavaScript in one way or another. And they have to know JavaScript to do front end anyway. So, you end up with a larger wealth of talent for your company if you're starting a startup. And you don't have to switch gears. You don't have to have people in regimented roles. Like, you are a back-end developer, and you back-end developers stay here in this box. And you guys are front-end developers, and you're here in this department. Now you can have just versatile developers that are just full-stack JavaScript developers, that if they have to hop on the back end, they have to hop on the front end. They have the versatility to do that. And honestly, for most applications, like most apps that I see people come and they say, oh, I want to build the next Uber or the next full-stack JavaScript's totally a great choice. The only time where I could see maybe using Scala or Golang or Python, or one of these more kind of advanced kind of system level languages, would be if you're trying to do like big data number crunching. JavaScript is like performant at small tasks. Let me look up where this guy has to go for Uber, like that's one address. If you want to take every single address in the country and then compare it to every single address in India, and then multiply it by the time and space between here and Mars, and you want to do some crazy number crunching, machine learning calculations, when it gets to big data, probably don't want to do that in Node.js. But for most consumer applications, you're building a Facebook, you're building a Twitter, you're building an Uber, those applications run really quick with fast operations that are low to medium data size. Node.js is super fast, it's super versatile, and I don't think it's going anywhere. So that's it, that's all I got. If you guys have comments, questions, please let me know. I'd love to help you. And yeah, subscribe to the channel. There's probably like a video here, like a video here or something, and probably my face down there, I don't know. So definitely check out my channel, subscribe to my stuff. I appreciate it. I do this to kind of give back. I struggled a lot. My first few years as a developer, it was lonely. There was no developer community on YouTube, let alone in New York City where I lived. There was no Google headquarters in New York City, and I struggled a lot. So I make these videos so that hopefully young developers out there don't have to struggle as much. So if you're a young developer and you're out there and you have any questions, just let me know. I'll be happy to help. Thanks, guys. Later. Peace.